4 fucking gold. Oh, hello. I'll do that. One gold? What am I wearing? Ugh. I mean, what else am I going to spend it on at this point, right?
That spell isn't ready yet.
So my attack power is 514 now? Holy shit. I feel like that's higher than my hunter.
I have just the thing for you. Be careful.
I mean, shit, my gear score go up? No, it went down, but this is definitely better. See if we can get a better belt. Please be dirt cheap. Oh, I could get it. Fuck it. Oh my god, we're so poor. Alright, that's it. That's it, baby. We're in there like swimwear.
I can't cast that yet.
528.
Well met. Goodbye.
Alright, we're almost pretty much pre-bis. I know we can't afford Humberts, so we gotta... Dude, we got the rings, though, which I'm super excited about. We don't have Bearded Bone Axe or Axe of Enforcer yet, but we have second best in line. We have Butcher's Cleaver and Stinging Viper. We don't have the Commander's Crest, but yeah, we're ready to... What's my back? Oh, I got best back. Yeah, we're fucking ready, man. We're ready. Alright, now, hopefully, we can make some solid gold here.
When mounted on the back of a Wind Rider, one sees that its reputation for strength and speed is well earned.
I'm actually excited to quest. Now, at this point, we're going to quest. We're going to get multiple things done. We're going to quest for gold. We're going to herb for gold. And we're going to get world PvP in. Hopefully, I don't get my shit kicked in, though. I'm going to be rusty at first. I think hunters are going to absolutely demolish me. But tomorrow, I feel like I'll have somewhat of a chance, maybe. So we will see. I feel like if I was Ellie spec, I would shit on them. But we will see. We will see. Hopefully we can do big dam. What we need to do, though, is we need to get some enchants rolling. Enchant weapon, lesser striking permanently. Enchant to 2 additional points of damage. So we need to get lesser striking working. Minor stamina on the shield, chest, minor stats, cloak, minor agility, wrist, lesser stamina. We're gonna wait until some of these we're gonna have to buy. I'm gonna have to buy Humberts. I'm gonna have to buy my bracers. We have quest items. We're gonna get the feet. I'm actually excited that this is a quest. Hopefully it's not too fucking hard. Mountain Lion Blood. I think I remember this quest. We got the rings, so we're fucking chilling on that. So Stone Talon Mountain. As soon as we get to Stone Talon, we need to work on a quest called the Den. When we get to Hillsbrad, we need to work on a quest called Elixir of Pain. When we get to Ashenvale, we need to work on a quest called Defkin for the Defkin Belt. Okay.
I can't pass that yet.
And we got Boone. Alright, let's repair.
Blood.
I'm sure we need to. Alright. You're a broke boy. Nice. PogChamp. Oh my god. Wanna duel? You'd get fucked up, bitch.
I'm out of range. It's too far away. I can't do that.
Oh my god. Um. Whew. Oh, we got that flurry, baby. Oh my goodness.
It's still recharging. I need to get closer.
Contested territory.
What can I do?
How?
80 silver, 58 silver. Oh, I hear some noise in here. Well, at least questing is going to be fast.
But I will never forget what the Grim Totem have done to my village.
It's almost better if I change my build. I should have, yeah, I should have did that. Oh well. Because I knew I was going to do this at this level, but... that's fine. I don't think it's going to matter too much. Max herbalism right here. Nice. What we got going on here? We got a hunter. We got a druid. Yeah. We're in trouble. Nice. Fucked him up. My man's on the quest, man. Good lord, man. Crazy part is my gear is not even good. Okay.
Need to get closer.
Sheesh. That's crazy that NPCs don't get pushback, man. It's kind of crazy. Bro, I need my homie to spawn.
Isn't ready yet.
I need the homies to spawns. Sheesh. My mans. Spawn. Bruh. What? Oh, this is gonna be dope. Christy drops out. On hot mic. Town hall with Vivek Ramaswamy and Candace Owens. I don't know.
Welcome, everybody, to this special podcast town hall hybrid event. We are here in Des Moines, Iowa. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. We got big news in politics today. Chris Christie has dropped out of the race and was caught on a hot mic. So this story is pretty wild, and we'll definitely talk about that. Because there is an interesting bit of information coming out. Chris Christie said that Ron DeSantis gave him a phone call and was petrified that he was going to, and then he stops right there. And then someone else says to him that Ron may get out of the race after Iowa, which would be really, really interesting considering there's so very few people left. But today, we're going to go over some of the big stories in the news and in this country over the past several years, which have bubbled up into this very serious presidential election cycle. And of course, we are hanging out with some really awesome people. The first thing I want to do is give a shout out to Based Records. They produce awesome music. They're helping build the parallel economy, and they've helped sponsor this event to make it all possible. You've got Chad Prather's I'd Be Jolly Too. Check out that song. You've got High Rez's Triggered and Ain't No Rock and Roll from 5 Times August. We're big fans of these guys. They've all been on Timcast IRL before. Seriously, basedrecords.com. Thank you guys so much for helping make this event possible. Also, become a member at timcast.com because we are going to have a special members-only uncensored after the show, VIP behind the scenes with none other than Vivek Ramaswamy, who is joining us today. How's it going, man?
It's good to be here, man, with our live studio audience in Iowa. Welcome,
live
guys.
studio audience. We got a bunch of people hanging out.
Love these guys. Love my Iowans right now.
Now, for the people who don't know you here, how would you introduce yourself? I'm kidding, of course.
I think we spent a lot of time here in Iowa, but Vivek, people have really gotten their pronunciation down over the course of this campaign. If there's one thing that we've gotten out of this campaign, people have really understood how to say rhyme name. Something with cake. Yeah.
Yeah. We have so many people on the show, and we'll be like, it's Vivek. And they'll go, oh, yeah, sorry. We also have Candace Owens hanging out.
Whoop, whoop. Where's my applause?
What's up, Candace?
That's a live studio applause.
You gotta get it up on the mic.
Can you hear me better now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Lou Brzezowski, of course, was already talking.
Yeah, hell yeah. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings of Iowa. Let's hear it from the crowd here. I think it's going to be a really awesome, incredible show. The conversation definitely is going to be spicy, I think, to say the least, with everyone here, as there's a lot of crazy things to talk about in 2024 that is already shaping up to be one hell of a year. And I think it's fair to say it's only going to get crazier from here.
Yeah, man, deepfakes. It's gonna be so wild, you guys. This ride, is this a simulation? Are we in some sort of crazy...
Yes, is actually the answer.
Dude. Ian was intending to make the show as crazy as possible.
Let's go deep. What's up, everybody? Hello. Looking good in the house.
So the first thing I'd like to do, because this is a special episode, we're going to be talking about a lot of things pertaining to this election cycle, is, I'm going to call out Vivek Ramaswamy right here in front of all of these big fans of yours, because you said in a CNN town hall that it's beginning to look, I'm paraphrasing, but it's beginning to look like January 6th was an inside job. And I must call you out, sir, because I will tell you definitively it was an inside job. And the media, of course, criticize you for pushing conspiracy theories. They're lying. I want to call it the media specifically, first and foremost, a handful of media outlets, many of whom may actually be in the room today. And so no disrespect to the individuals. I know these people aren't the ones who wrote the stories. That's right. But the first thing I have for everybody is the definition of inside job from Oxford Languages. And inside job is defined as a crime committed by or with the assistance of a person living or working on the premises where it occurred. That's simple, right? Like, some guy robs a bank and a security guard opens the door to let him in. That's the assistance. That's an inside job. How about that? I also, just for good measure, got the definition from Merriam-Webster, just to be sure. And it once again says something very similar. Done by or with the help of someone in a position or within an organization or group.
So I got a question.
Let me go through these stories real quick. So we have this from CNN, fact-checking Vivek Ramaswamy's CNN town hall, where they say, a false claim that police rolled out the red carpet on January 6th. They go on to say that you said it was an inside job. They say, facts first, Ramaswamy's claim that the rioters were invited into the Capitol is false. About 140 police officers were assaulted while trying to stop the mob from reaching the Capitol, et cetera, et cetera. This is a trick that many in media do, where they will take a true statement, a fact, then try to apply it to a totally different set of facts. Is it true that police officers were injured? Yes, it is. Is it also true that police opened the doors and fanned people in? Yes, it is. Here's a story from CNN.com that I will use to debunk CNN.com. Man who said January 6th was magical acquitted in U.S. Capitol riot case. where they say a federal judge on Wednesday found Matthew Martin not guilty of 4 federal misdemeanors related to trespassing. Martin, who worked for a government contractor before his arrest following the riot, successfully argued that a U.S. Capitol police officer waved him into the building. At least one video played during the trial appeared to show an officer moving his arm in a waving motion. Yeah, CNN really doesn't want to admit it, but let's break down the facts here. A judge determined a police officer made a waving motion. Thus, a man who entered the building felt he was invited, and thus there were no criminal charges to be had. The case was dismissed. If the police officer assisted that man, would that not be an inside job, according to Oxford? Here's an article from CNN. Joe Scarborough lambasts Capitol Police. You opened the effing doors for them. Going on to say that they politely opened the doors for terrorists who had scrawled on the door, murder the media. If the police politely opened the doors, providing assistance to these people to come in, would that not be an inside job? And how about this one from the New York Post? January 6 footage shows Capitol cops escorting QAnon shaman to Senate floor. So I have to just simply say, when we say something like it was an inside job, or it appears to be, they'll immediately respond by saying, what's your proof that the Biden administration did it? Well, I never said that. I said it was an inside job. The Capitol Police were taking selfies with people. In some instances, opened the doors and let people in. I'm glad to have called out these news organizations, first and foremost. NBC News, of course. Vivek Ramaswamy promotes January 6 conspiracy theory by suggesting it was an inside job. I think according to CNN's own reporting, as well as the Oxford definition, we've here definitively stated and proven it was an inside job.
My question is, if the people inside are under duress and they let the people outside in because they're afraid for their lives, is it still technically an inside job, or was it provoked by the crowd's, fear, essence of fear? It's a bit, I kind of lie with you that I think it is still technically, neutrally an inside
You're
job.
also assuming that that was the case, right? I mean, I think that's even under that most charitable interpretation. Those aren't necessarily the same people. You're talking about thousands of people. So some people had some violent behavior outside. Different people who show up at a door are allowed in a friendly manner. From the standpoint of the person who was allowed in, it doesn't matter what circumstance the police officer was under. The question is, what do they believe the government is telling them? So from the standpoint of that defendant, I'm a guy who walks up to the House of the People, wants to walk in, take my iPhone around. You see many of those people. Okay, probably the first time in the Capitol building. And they were allowed in by a federal police officer, that of the Capitol Police. Now, I find weeks or months or a year and a half later, I'm part of the largest manhunt in modern American history to be put into prison, in many cases charged, held without even being charged. So I think at the level of the individual, this is what it comes down to. It's not about finding what circumstance was or wasn't understandable for the government. For somebody who's going to be locked up, we better darn well apply the highest standard of a burden of proof to say that's what we're going to apply before you lock you up. And so the Capitol Police initially were sitting on a lot of that footage. They said it sat with Congress. So many of those defendants were charged without getting access to that video footage. And again, the justification they made was, usually a prosecutor has to turn over exculpatory evidence to a defendant. But here they didn't do it because they said Congress technically has the tapes, and that's not the prosecutors of the DOJ. Again, from the standpoint of an individual defendant, it doesn't matter. It's the government that's coming after you to put you in prison. And if the government's going to come after you to put you in prison, a couple basic things have to be true. That government did not actually cause you or incite you to commit the crime. And we're just talking about the Capitol Police dimension of this, let alone the FBI dimension. And the other thing that has to be true is you have a chance to defend yourself with full exculpatory evidence, including the video footage of the circumstances of you being allowed into that very building you were allegedly trespassing in. If neither of those things were the case, then I think that that's not a crime. And anybody who has been convicted or pressured into a false plea deal under those circumstances will, on my watch, get a pardon on day one, because that's the right thing to do to stand for the rule of law in this country.
Would you retry them with the new evidence?
I think that it would depend on the circumstances, but when you think about somebody who was, first of all, peacefully protesting that day and allowed in those circumstances, there's something bigger going on here. In that same year, we've applied a totally different standard of the rule of law to violent riots. I'm not going to call them mostly peaceful protests. It's a translation, if you're decoding the media lingo on this one. Mostly peaceful protest in the year 2020 for Antifa or BLM refers to violent riots. Against the backdrop of a year where there were all kinds of peaceful to violent riots across this country. And so against that backdrop, I believe especially what these people have been put through already, this is years of hell that we've put citizens of this country through. Anybody who was peaceful and did not physically assault somebody that day will get a day one pardon from me. And then I'm going to go down the list, even of the people who allegedly, right? I don't believe anymore the government if they just said you have violent as an allegation. Now let's get to the facts and go down the list. Anybody else who had their constitutional rights denied during that process will also, in addition, get a pardon. I can't commit to that on day one, but on day one I commit to start the process of going case by case. And it's not even about those defendants individually, though that matters, of course, to me. It's about the future of this country. Because if we put ourselves in a position where they can go after political opponents for this reason, they can go after political opponents for any reason. You got Julian Assange rotting in a foreign prison, while the person who leaked to Julian Assange is a woman by the name of Chelsea Manning, who effectively got her sentence commuted by President Obama because she's transgender. I actually have increasingly concluded she's probably not even transgender, she's probably just smart, knowing that that's how you have to identify to be a member of a politically favorable class. And so the two standards of the rule of law are really what irk me the most. And so this isn't just for the people who were there on January 6th. It's for the rest of us in this country as well. And so I don't think retrial for most of those cases is the right answer. If you're a peaceful protester on January 6th, you were truly peaceful and you were convicted or forced to plead or coerced to plead under false pretenses, you will get a pardon on day one when I'm in office.
I want to bring up real quick just to highlight again what CNN said in their article fact-checking you when they said about 140 police officers were assaulted while trying to stop the mob from breaching the Capitol. It's not shocking that almost every single news story that we hear about January 6th involves those who are acting violently. But I think perhaps one thing that we can do better, especially, we've got Standard.com, SDNR.com, we have a news team, is focus on those who were peaceful, nonviolent, and should have passed us back. I met a woman at a restaurant, and this is in the Maryland area. She went down to D.C. with her husband. This is the story she told me. She showed up an hour and a half or so after the rioting had already concluded and people were actually leaving. She walks up to the Capitol building with open sidewalks. There's people standing on the grass talking. There's people walking around. The doors are wide open. Her and her husband walk up, see people and the police standing there, walking
around.
She said she was in for a few minutes, asked what was going on. They said nothing much and said okay, and she left. She was sentenced to 18 months in jail. The court did not care that she was nonviolent, that she was just a tourist who went to see Donald Trump speak, was unaware of any barricades. I think the issue is, especially for the corporate press, those stories aren't newsworthy for them. They're not going to get clicks. If you take a look at how CNN reported the acquittal of Matthew Martin, they still just don't want to admit that a police officer waved a man into the building and a judge agreed he was welcomed in. They still try and make it seem like it's all a misunderstanding and the cop wasn't waving him.
Yeah, and you know what, the corporate press piece is interesting of this because some of the people who are now going after, there were members of the press that day in the field covering it as members of the press. But if they're part of the corporate press, somehow that was immune from investigation. You have independent journalists who are actually documenting what was happening are the ones that the Justice Department's now going after. You got the likes of Owen Schroyer, who was actually yelling, as best I know, didn't even go in the Capitol, was on a megaphone yelling 1776. I didn't think that was a crime in this country. But apparently that was, by definition. And he ended up spending time, actually, unfortunately, under prosecution and under conviction. So I think it's a violation of the rule of law. I also think you haven't even gotten to the spicy stuff. But first of all, I want to say one thing. I'm glad that CNN, at least took the approach they did. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here doing this, actually. Probably. CNN, I did a town hall here in Iowa about maybe a month and a half ago, where we started to talk to this woman, Abby Phillips, who was monitoring the town hall. They literally cut it off 5 minutes early. Like, literally, it was supposed to be, there was a full time, there was a full run of show. By the time I start talking about January 6th, there's only a few third rails that you really can't touch. But for whatever reason, this is one of them. They ended the whole thing 5 minutes early, trot out a bunch of different experts explaining to their audience why everything they just heard was misinformation and needed to be debunked as dangerous for the future. And then that's when they start calling us. And they actually, on YouTube, funny thing is, they threatened us with the cease and desist for putting up that town hall while Nikki Haley still sat up there for 6 months. I think part of it is, Tim, it's not just that it's less spicy for less clicks. I think there's something deeper and more ideological definitely going on here, that they believe it is their responsibility to make sure the public does not hear in this case, here are the facts of what happened, but even in other cases, viewpoints that are alternative to their own. I do think that's an important part of what's going on at the highest levels of these organizations.
Well, this is the thing. We don't know a lot of the facts. How many FBI agents played a role in what happened? How many undercover police officers or other federal agencies participated in this event? Why did it take so long to respond? What just happened to to Ray Epps and how was he able to get that kind of deal when there's so many people rotting away in solitary confinement right now. And you don't even have to go as far as to say it was an inside job or it wasn't an inside job. The burden of proof is on the government. The people have questions. We should demand answers. And I think we need a full investigation, not just of that event, but the entire FBI. From its inception, they have been doing illegal, horrible things to the American public, lying, spying, destroying people's personal lives, blackmailing individuals, including MLK. And more importantly, when you look at what happened specifically in 2001 in New York City, the FBI also played a major role in that incident that they were never held accountable for. We need a full investigation into the FBI. Would that be something that you would support?
Yes, but I think I have gained enough of an understanding of the FBI such that I can confidently say the correct answer is not to give them some new building or anything else. It is not to replace Christopher Wray, which is just a fake mirage. Get Christopher Wray out, you get James Comey 2.0. I'm convinced the right answer is to shut down the failed Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. That's the only answer that remains. And I actually think you guys are, playing almost nicer with respect to the facts that we do have. As I said, I agree that it appears to be an inside job, but we don't really know the full extent of what happened. I will say, though, it's interesting. I don't know if you guys have talked about this in the show before. I've kind of gone deep on this because I think it's important, not just for this incident, but for the future of the country. You know who the Detroit field office head was at the time of the alleged Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot? Are you guys, is this something you've talked about before or not really?
I think we have, but take it away.
Yeah, so this is important, though, to understand the nexus. It's kind of an underbelly in our law enforcement. So the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot actually began as a plot to storm the Capitol in the state of Michigan. And you know how it started was people at the FBI putting people up to this. Poor guys, one of them was actually supposedly getting hot water from a Mexican restaurant across the street. These are people who are not doing well in their life, who they've put up and cultivated with $5,000 credit cards with $5,000 limits to go buy munitions and otherwise, to initially what began as a plot to storm the Capitol, but eventually ended up being a plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. A good number of the people who were captured here, like we're talking about a high proportion of them were absolutely federal informants. And yet the Detroit field office head, and they took that all the way to trial, several of the people at trial were acquitted on grounds of entrapment. One of the jurors at the end went to one of the defendants, just gave him a hug, and apologized for what he had been through because the juror actually had to see what the FBI put these people up to. And you can't make this stuff up. In October of 2020, 3 months before January of 2021, guess who gets a promotion to be the D.C. field office head? Was none other than that Detroit field office head. And what do you have on January 6, 2021, 3 months later, is a storming of the U.S. Capitol. So there's a lot here that suggests, the D.C. pipe bomb story at the DNC and the RNC headquarters. Why haven't we heard the first thing about what we actually know, despite the existence of video footage about that, and the careful coincidence of exactly when that pipe bomb at the RNC headquarters happened to have been discovered, with the timer on it down to the time where the actual vote was supposed to be cast for certifying the results of the election?
It's just an impossibility. That was the number one thing for me.
Yeah.
The day after, and sorry to cut you off, but the day after January 6th, I was like, this is it's complete setup by the FBI. If you mean to tell me that I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time, a couple of blocks away from the White House when January 6th happened. It was a very bizarre day because we had an entire summer of people rioting. It was scary to go outside. I was pregnant at the time. Cars set on fire. Every day there was a crazy protest, people storming buildings at all times. Suddenly, after the Summer of Love BLM, we were getting phone calls, people asking if we were okay after January 6th when there wasn't any sounds outside of where I lived. If you mean to tell me that in Washington, D.C., where you can't walk 2 feet, it is the most surveilled building in the world, okay? That a couple of blocks away from the White House, they can't figure out where there, again, cameras on every single corner, every inch, who got out of their car, placed pipe bombs at the RNC and the DNC headquarters and went away. And let me tell you how extensive their search was, because this is something that people are not talking about, because you're talking about people that stood trial, and of course, that's the most important, people that are being locked up, people that have committed suicide. Let's not forget to talk about people that have killed themselves for fear of being locked up because they showed up to support the sitting president of the United States. I have 2 friends from Stamford, Connecticut, who showed up to hear Donald Trump speak and went home. Okay, that was it. They never went into the Capitol building, nothing. After the speech, they didn't go up. FBI agents showed up at their house. This was a harassment and intimidation campaign that took place. If you even showed up to support President Trump, they got questioned. They found a picture of them on Facebook with a MAGA flag. They heard Trump speak and they went home. And these people were questioned by the feds. So they had enough resources, right, to send them out and hunt down people that were posting pictures, but they can't find out who just tried to blow up headquarters in Washington, D.C., a couple of blocks away from the White House.
And you want to know what the weirdest part about this is? And I'm just, as I go deeper, learning facts about this, is Kamala Harris, the number 2, for better or worse, to succeed the U.S. president, was at the DNC headquarters that morning. With all, I mean, the level of security there, that understand, then suddenly, randomly, they just see it on a park bench later. So I think there's enough facts here to know the government has not been transparent with us. But furthermore, we know Capitol Police officers let him in. We know that the video footage was selectively released, such that you did not see shooting rubber bullets and tear gas into the mostly peaceful crowd. You saw the reaction of those people hitting the Capitol after releasing that, and then you did not see initially Capitol Police officers allowing people in peacefully. It's a distortion, and we just deserve the truth.
Well, I have a question for you. So I've often talked about the May 29th insurrection. May 29th, 2020, thousands of far-left extremists stormed the barricades of the White House, fought with hundreds, if not several hundred police officers, injuring around between 70 and 140. They firebombed the White House grounds. That's true. They set fire to a guard tower, and they set fire to St. John's Church. This is a historical church the Founding Fathers would go to. It was so severe that the president was forced into his emergency bunker, thus disrupting his official duties. And
really?
Yes.
Wow.
And my question is, where was our commission? Where was the, the photos of that day, when, I go to family gatherings over the holidays, and I show a photo of an aerial shot of D.C., which many of you may have seen, smoke rising out all around the White House and the surrounding areas from fires that were being lit. The president was forced into an emergency bunker against his will, and the media made fun of him and called him Bunker Boy for having had to experience this. Donald Trump said, I went down, they showed me it, he clearly didn't want to be there. When law enforcement then cleared out the extremists who had laid siege to the White House, I'm being purposefully hyperbolic, you understand why, Donald Trump came out the next day and took a picture, and they attacked him and insulted him for having defended the White House and a church that was set on fire by an extremist faction. A faction so extreme, in fact, that similar groups and cells within the same ideology had seized several blocks in various cities. In Atlanta, in Seattle, in their Capitol Hill occupation, and in Minnesota with George Floyd Square. Yeah. Videos emerged out of, I believe it was Seattle, of armed groups walking around with AR-15s, pointing them at drivers. People of a similar or same ideology, in fact, many of these people do coordinate, engaged in insurrection. Now, of course, we can calm down and say a bunch of extremist activists rioting in the streets, no insurrection. Fair point. Then neither was the Capitol.
Well, what about Brett Kavanaugh? Was anybody alive for the Brett Kavanaugh hearings? Do you remember them storming in, going into senators' offices? I'm telling you, D.C. was insane, and nobody cared until January 6th happened. This was like a routine thing that was happening to get their ideas across. They were doing sit-ins. They were walking in, in the halls uninvited. They couldn't get these people out. I mean, it's just crazy to think that suddenly they focused on January 6th, and it's hard to imagine that the feds were not in on it when we know we have all of these pieces of footage.
At the very least.
One thing, because I think there's two strands here. Both are interesting. I think there's two different points, but both are interesting. But I think it's important not to mix them up because it might risk us missing the real plot here, which is, one is, have we applied the different standard of rule of law throughout this country over the course of 2020? Absolutely. Antifa, BLM, you name it. If you have a left-wing ideology, it was mostly peaceful protest, you ignore it. That's a glaring point and deserves to be called out. And I think that there can be no justice with two standards of the rule of law based on your political ideology. I think, to be clear, what happened on January 6th was not some small joke. This was significant in terms of the number of people, in terms of some of the video footage the mainstream media picked out. But I think what's significant about it is we don't know what actually caused those people to act the way they did. Was it really the government instigating something that otherwise didn't exist, using it as a deflection to achieve a national security state's revival that had otherwise receded over the course of 20 years since the post 9/11 period. And so maybe I've just told you what I actually think is going on here. But that's what I think the facts suggest, is there was a reason for these people to not only get Donald Trump out of office, but to discredit this, to relegate this line of thinking, the movement behind him, to the dustbins of history. And this was the way to do it. So I think that there was a lot of depth to this, and it wasn't just that, okay, well, like this was, I mean, these are two different standards, two different bad things, yes. But this was, I think, a very serious forethought exercise in accomplishing something. And unless we see through it, first step when you see a problem is to name it. Unless we do that, they are going to accomplish what they set out to accomplish. That's what I believe.
I'd like to jump to some breaking news from today, and then we'll get into some core issues that are happening. We've got stories on immigration. There was a school in New York that they told the kids to go remote. You can't use the school anymore because illegal immigrants are coming in. We have a breaking story from James O'Keefe, where he actually tracked down buses engaged in human trafficking, and they flee from him. It's really interesting. But we'll start with this story from our good friends at the New York Times. Christie caught on hot mic disparaging Haley and DeSantis. Now, the interesting thing here is, of course, that he dropped out. But we also have this hot mic moment I want to play and get your thoughts on. Hopefully will this play properly? I mean, I hope so. Let's play it. I can hear it down here. Is there a way to get it to play on the speakers? There is no way to get it to play on the speakers? Not right now. I can't even hear it on the headphones. Okay, well, we can't play it, unfortunately.
We know what he said.
I've heard it. We've heard it.
You've heard it.
We've all heard it.
So I want to clarify some things, because in the tweet that went that started getting a lot of play, it's got 500,000 so far. It says, Chris Christie says Nikki Haley is, quote, gonna get smoked, and you and I both know it. She's not up to this. In regards to Trump, Christie says Ron DeSantis called him up petrified. Now what Christie says is, Ron called me petrified that I was gonna, or something like that, and then cuts off. Someone else then intervenes and says he's probably getting out after Iowa. I personally do not believe Ron drops out after Iowa. But I'm curious. There's a few things. Candace, you actually made a really good point about this, if you want to.
So when I was sitting down, and I think I actually said this on my podcast, but during the first Republican debates, it was, the energy going into it was essentially that DeSantis was going to have to come out and say stuff against Vivek, obviously, because Vivek was having a surge in the polls. And interestingly enough, he didn't say anything to Vivek, but then suddenly Chris Christie just went like an attack dog. And I just thought it was really odd. I was like, this feels strangely coordinated to me. I feel like Chris Christie and Ron DeSantis are maybe friends, and they're all friends, and they all know that this is the guy that they have to attack. I felt this. I said this in my podcast, and then I thought it was really interesting that DeSantis called him petrified about whatever it is. I just thought to myself, why is DeSantis calling Chris Christie at all? Do they have a relationship? Again, these are just questions. We probably are not going to get the answer to them, as they're already working on a spin and saying that DeSantis was just calling to, bid him farewell from the race or something.
Petrified.
Yeah, DeSantis was petrified that Christie would do something.
Right.
We don't know what he was going to do, but that's according to Chris Christie. I'm curious as to why they were in conversation at all.
Yeah.
And why DeSantis would express to him his fear over something Christie might do.
I haven't talked to either today. I can tell you that. And so I'll tell you something. I think that there's something deeper going on, and this is today a footnote. It's a footnote, but a footnote in the deeper game that's hiding in plain sight. I think, Ian, you said, oh, is this all just one giant deep fake? I actually think it is.
Yeah.
Actually, I think we're witnessing a deep fake in real time, and the deep fake is this. And the people who are the subjects to it, I think every one of the people who is a subject to it, for better or worse, is falling for the deep fake, which is that this system, the system, has made a decision, the same one that they thought they were making back when Donald Trump was exiting office. Okay, they didn't get it right that time around. To make a decision that this man shall not be allowed anywhere near the White House again, period. They will stop at nothing. And at this point, I really mean nothing, to keep this man out of the White House. So what are they trying to do? I was trying to figure out for a long time. It didn't feel like it was going to be a Trump versus Biden race. There's a lot with Biden. You got the documents case coming out. Why are they trotting that against Biden after like 10 years? Hunter Biden, okay, we could have talked about it. Now suddenly it's gaining credibility. Didn't feel like it was going to be Biden, so I think incorrectly assumed that it was going to be Gavin Newsom or somebody else who's going to be a puppet other than Biden they want to trot out. And I think what became increasingly clear is that they've actually found a much more convenient new puppet. A puppet who actually can give them a lot of air cover by being within the Republican Party or the guise of the Republican Party itself. And that's Nikki Haley, of course. The very people who are paying to keep Trump off the ballot in lawsuits, like Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, or even Larry Fink, the king of the woke industrial complex, the leader of BlackRock. look at who they're supporting. It's not Gavin Newsom. It's not Joe Biden. It's Nikki Haley, actually. And so what they want to do, to put it in plain sight, is to make this a two-horse race between Donald Trump and a puppet who they can control. I believe that's Nikki Haley. Eliminate Trump from contention, and then trot in their controllable puppet into the White House. That's the game that's hiding in plain sight, and I think everybody's falling for it, actually.
I don't think they're falling for it. I think it's odd every time we look at the polls or the news organizations. They keep telling us Nikki is surging, and it's so obvious if you speak to people that she's not. After every single debate, they're like, Nikki won, even when it's so obvious. She's not even third place in terms of who won, and they're trying to convince us.
Every time, yeah.
A full propaganda effort when it comes to Nikki Haley, and you're right.
I think the part
it's
they're
pretty
falling
sinister what they're doing, but the people, I don't think, are falling for.
The only part that I'm worried the people are falling for is some idea that this system is literally going to somehow stop short of literally stopping at nothing to keep Donald Trump away from the White House.
You think is it Trump or is it what he represents, the methodologies? He's like canceling the Trans-Pacific Partnership, kind of isolationist mentality.
I think the third rails there are definitely foreign policy. I think ending the war in Ukraine on the terms that either I or Trump have suggested definitely hits the third rail. I think the preservation of the national security state is a third rail. Those are the two big ones. The preservation of the national security bureaucracy at home. You can talk about the anti-woke stuff, the transgender stuff. Yeah, I mean, we have disagreements on the partisan basis, but that's all fine. It's mostly a deflection, actually. It's almost a convenient fact that Nikki Haley occasionally gets to say things that pay homage to the anti-woke movement. I don't think she has actual beliefs, but at least it's part of the cover. The real third rails are foreign policy. Keep the interventionist, neoliberal, neoconservative worldview of the U.S. as the hegemon that actually gets people to cut in on the rake here at home, the likes of the John Boltons and the Nikki Haleys. And then third rail is the national security state at home. But I think in Donald Trump's case, I think that they've convinced themselves that with this man in particular, he is so dangerous to the future. He's demonstrated himself to be, their words, their view, not mine, that they have to and have a moral duty to this country. And when you believe you have a moral duty to do something, then you're bound by your more subordinate moral constraints. Because there's the everyday moral norms you operate against. But if you think it's about the future existence of humanity or a nation, then those ordinary constraints no longer apply. And I think that's the mode this system is now in. The ordinary constraints are, okay, you let people on a ballot. Not anymore. You don't prosecute people for made-up crimes, especially in the middle of a presidential election. Not anymore. And if they've ratcheted up each of those times and none of those things work, I just think eventually they're just going to stop at nothing, whatever it takes to take Trump out, after they've narrowed it down to a two-horse race between Trump and Haley, which in turn is why I'm in this till the very end. And I think that we have a responsibility to this country to make sure that that plot doesn't play out. They're selling us the rope today that they'll use to hang us tomorrow. That's what's happening. And I don't want people in our movement to fall for the other part of this, to somehow think that that actually isn't going to be successfully executed.
This hot mic moment where someone mutters Ron's probably getting out after Iowa. Let's imagine this scenario, that Ron actually decides that whatever happens in Iowa, his showing wasn't good enough and it's time to end this race. The worst possible thing imaginable would be you then leaving the race as well, because it would by default give us either Trump or Haley.
And I'm definitely not. Exactly, for that reason.
That's a nightmare scenario.
But, look, I think, I have my own views. I think we're going to deliver a major surprise here in Iowa. We can talk about that separately. I think we're going to shock the system, and the vibes on the ground are very good. But as part of the 50,000-foot view here, I actually think if you play this out intuitively, it feels like the next step in the game among the corporate candidates is Ron would make a good vice president for Nikki, right? Christie out of the way is one footnote today. All right, eliminate part of the consolidation in New Hampshire. Christie's not running for president of the United States ever. He was arguably running for vice president of New Hampshire. But anyway, once he exited, we'll actually combine that in to prop up Nikki a little bit more. The next thing is you take the Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is not in New Hampshire so much, but in certain other states, Florida or otherwise, turn that over as well to the anti-Trump movement. I don't think Ron knows that. I think if people asked Ron DeSantis, he would say, of course I would not be Nikki's vice president. And I think inside him, he probably would believe that that's actually what he thinks. But that almost pretends that what he thinks actually matters. His donors are the ones that put him up to run for president in the first place. I don't think the man on his own volition. I think there are other people who put him up to run for president at a time where it didn't make sense for him to do it. The same people are going to put him up to be Nikki's vice president. So you play this forward, that's where this goes. Final step, take Trump out of contention, trot the corporate puppets into office. That's where this plot ends. And I feel like I see this with a level of clarity that makes it torturous. It's like a kind of form of torture to watch this playing out in real time without standing up and actually doing something about it.
Let me real quick, just to get it in there. Scenario. Donald Trump wins the primary. He comes right on out and says, Vivek Ramaswamy, you are my vice president. What do you say?
Donald Trump wins you're saying Donald Trump wins the primary and then that. So I think we just have to have an honest conversation. I mean, if that's the scenario we're in, that's not what I'm playing for, but if that's what we're in, I have an inconvenient attribute, which is that I have opinions. I have strong opinions about things. I'm not somebody who really, rolls over or whatever. But what I've said is Donald Trump has my full support if he's the nominee. And I expect his full support if I'm the nominee. But I don't think we get to that place. That's the whole premise of when you think it's Gavin Newsom or Joe Biden as the puppet, you think you might get to that place. I don't think they want Biden or Newsom. I think Nikki is a far more reliable pawn for the system with respect to the two things they care about most, which is keeping the foreign war machine humming, far more reliable on places from the Middle East to Ukraine. She's far more hawkish than actually anybody in the Democratic side. And with respect to the national security state, I don't think Joe Biden could have come up with the idea if he tried to tie every social media account and internet account with the government-issued ID. So I don't think it goes there, Tim. I think where it goes is they want this late in the primary, and then they get the air cover because the Democratic Party's brand isn't doing too hot. The permanent state is fundamentally nonpartisan at its core. So they get the air cover of saying, oh, yeah, we weren't even doing the Democrat game where most of the Republican base watching cable news thinks it's about beating Biden. They're missing the plot. That's what's going on.
That's actually a really great point. We were talking just the other day, there was a story, a J.P. Morgan top strategist, I'm sure you heard, said his prediction is that Joe Biden drops out just after Super Tuesday due to a health issue. I view that as a very, very good strategy for Democrats. I had been saying for some time that I believe Joe Biden will drop out. His health is just not there. His polling is not there. It is political suicide. However, many people pointed out in our chats and in our audience that it's too late to have a primary. There's nothing they can do. Actually, that sounds like the best play. Joe Biden says, I'm running. No primary to be had. Don't worry about it. Come March, he says, oh no, my ailing heart. This gives the DNC the ability to just appoint who is going to be their nominee. However, I think you actually make a much better point. Why even worry about going into a political conflict with Donald Trump and the populist Republican base?
Yes.
When you can win from within.
Exactly.
Nikki Haley.
And that's exactly what's going on. And also they have this ailing Kamala Harris problem because if anything other than Kamala Harris is the nominee, then they got the racist, misogynist thing going on, which undermines their own self-stated narrative. And I think just the brand of the Democratic Party for the Larry Finks or the establishment puppet masters of the world, it's a little tarnished right now. Let them heal themselves. We're going to do this within the Republican Party with a much more reliable vessel, with a little bit more of a polished exterior, a little bit more committed on the pro-war agenda, and a lot more committed on the censorship and national security agenda here at home. I think that actually gets their job done much better without some of the inconveniences that come with Biden. So like you, I was initially of the mind that, who are they going to trot out instead of Biden? And nothing quite really, the shoe didn't really fit with any of them. Michelle Obama, Gavin Newsom. And then you see it's just staring in plain sight. They're already halfway through doing it within the Republican primary, and then it's game over, and they get the air cover of saying they weren't even propping up Democrats. That's what's going on.
Let's jump to some stories on some key issues. I have this tweet from James O'Keefe. This video was pretty shocking to watch. There have been reports about buses that have been trafficking illegal immigrants. In fact, I can say this as well. I have personally confirmed the existence of major airline boarding passes that state no name given. This story was broken by Ashley St. Clair. We're still waiting on vetting and development. So by all means, anyone in the press who wants to doubt this story, you feel free to do so. But I will put my reputation on the line and say I have reviewed the materials. It's more than just a boarding pass saying no name given. We've had our own employees at Timcast witness on these flights doing these events planes full of illegal immigrants carrying these bags with instructions. They don't speak English. Someone is doing this. And it may be not just, we know the Biden administration has been facilitating much of this. We know this because back in 2021, there was a report about migrant children, illegal immigrant children, being smuggled on flights in the late hours, or the early hours of the morning, into places like Tennessee and Westchester. And we from those stories and from the expansion of them, so we know that exists. We also know that, yes, Greg Abbott and other governors have been sending illegal immigrants deeper into the country in various places. The question is, why is this happening? Why isn't our border being secured? Why is it that when James O'Keefe, and this video it's crazy, they follow a bus carrying these illegal immigrants, the bus tries to hit them, the bus tries fleeing and swerving through the road, going on and off exits, trying to lose them because journalists are following them, and then actually stops and does not release its passengers and then leaves again. Something about what they're doing has them scared someone will find out they're doing it. But I'll give you one quick story that happened to me personally. Outside of this, Ashley St. Clair showed me the materials. It's a boarding pass that says no name given. Do you want to board a major airliner with people? Our security, our TSA has no idea who these people are, where they come from. I was in Chicago over the holiday. We flew on a private jet. How about that? It's really fun, isn't it? And our shuttle bus driver said the other day, a 737 came in, and we were told by our bosses that it was the Blackhawks. How fun is that? So you're gonna get to go service a plane, pull out the luggage for a famous hockey team. He said when they pulled up to the plane and opened it up, there were 3 garbage bags in the forward cargo hold. That's it. No luggage, nothing. They then found out that the entire plane, 140 passengers, were illegal immigrants, and he said it was Swift Air. I don't know. That's what he told me. I asked him, did they lie to you, claiming it was the Blackhawks, because you would not have served that plane had you known you'd be facilitating illegal immigration? And he went, bingo, exactly. So my question now is, with all of this news breaking, and this is a massive story, I'm interested in your view on what's going on. I want to know how you plan to handle it, what you would do, and I also want to know your position on how do we handle the fact that there are federal law enforcement officers actually facilitating this?
Yeah, well, I think it's, again, one of these, when it comes to the media, third rail issues, when you name what's going on, so forget the labels, great replacement theory, whatever, just forget the labels. What's going on is, what's the most parsimonious explanation is, there is a facilitation of mass illegal migration into the United States to secure lasting electoral majorities for the Democratic Party. And the reason, that's not a conspiracy theory is it is a pre-stated strategy of Democrats dating back to about 10 years ago. And it's not a surprise when you got Mayorkas sitting by Joe Biden's side about 10 years ago, the guy who's actually running the Department of Homeland Security right now, who is in turn refusing to enforce the Remain in Mexico policies. Yes, that's exactly what's going on and hiding in plain sight. And the math makes sense. It works. So now you have AOC coming in for cover in recent days, this was yesterday or the day before, saying that actually the right solution isn't building the wall, but to document the undocumented, which is the next step to them participating in those elections. And so it's, if somebody tells you this is what I'd like to do, then they take actions consistent with achieving what they'd like to do, and then consummate it by actually doing that very thing in changing the composition of the electorate and translating into who actually ends up voting in elections. You tend to believe that that's the most parsimonious explanation, not something else that we're otherwise struggling to figure out how to solve. Well, once we figure out how to solve that, we realize it's not a technical problem. And sometimes it's what bothers me in a lot of the border discussions is people will get into some sort of, I've done this too, I'll get into technical details. Do we need aquatic barriers in the Rio Grande? What do we think about the airlines? How should they be conforming the standards to the other people at the TSA, the thousands standing around, as I call them at the airport, or what are they doing? None of that matters. Actually eliminate the intention. Get the intentions in the right place. Say our intention is for people who enter this country illegally to not be in this country. Technically, it becomes actually a very easy challenge to solve. Militarize the southern border. We're militarizing other people's borders. How about militarizing our own with our own military? Militarize our border as we are doing and should not be doing for others. Use the aquatic barriers in the Rio Grande. Stop giving money to Central America. Most of the people coming through Mexico, 80% of them didn't start in Mexico. Require each of those countries to build a border barricade all the way from Venezuela to the southern border of Texas. And birthright citizenship for kids of illegals. The 14th Amendment does not apply to the kids of illegals. I can go to the legal argument on this. They duped Donald Trump on this one. They said you need a constitutional amendment. Actually, you don't. Stop federal funding for sanctuary cities. We're paying for this. Our federal taxpayer money is actually paying for this facilitation of the domestic transfer to sanctuary cities. And then anybody in this country should be returned to their country of origin if you're here illegally. It's that simple. Now, they say there's only 6,000 ICE agents, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents. Well, again, if you read the law, there's a section in the law, I think it's 287G or something like this, that allows ICE agents to serve their warrants via local law enforcement. You just need, again, somebody running, ideally the entire executive branch, a president who tells the Department of Homeland Security and ICE to use that authority to work with local law enforcement. Now you got 1 million people, not just 6,000, to get the job done. So I gave you all of this as though the technical challenge was really the challenge. It's not. It's a challenge of intention. Right now, there's been a long-standing intention to fundamentally change the composition of the U.S. electorate. If you call that a great replacement theory, CNN will have a conniption. If you say that, you know what, this is part of an electoral strategy, they would ask you what's so wrong with that. But either way, we got to at least air what it actually is to be able to have a debate whether this is desirable policy or not.
But if you say if you like it and if you support people coming in and replacing the local population, you of course get promoted by the corporate media.
Yeah.
There's crazy stats out there talking about how there's more illegals brought into the United States than actual babies born inside of this country. This is, to me, the weaponization of human trafficking, the introduction of the third world into the United States that's going to create a super elitist Uber class and a poor poverty everyone else class. This is far beyond just even a great replacement. This is essentially the destruction of this country from within. How can we roll this back? How can we go back from hundreds of thousands of people coming into this country in such a weaponized way?
Billions of people.
Well, you can draft them into the military. I mean,
Send them to Ukraine, huh?
Because the idea of mass deportations is like a storybook Nazi Germany visage. Like, I can see the images of like newly deputized ICE agents, like a 19-year-old cop going and like grabbing some woman and pulling her out of her house and her screaming as the baby's lying on the ground. Like, the world will not tolerate it, even our own country. As much as I'm not saying that deportations are off the table, but that's the imagery that would be swung with something like that. So what do you do? Send them into the army? Go let them earn their citizenship by fighting in the Ukraine? I don't know what the plan is.
The only thing I would say about that is, one is I do favor in substance doing this as humanely and respectfully as possible in substance, largely because for many of these people, it's not necessarily their fault, right? If you're sitting in Honduras or wherever and you got a U.S. president, an entire apparatus that's giving you a wink and a nod to come on over, who knows? Maybe if many of us were in their shoes, we would have done the same thing, especially we're parents of children who want better lives for our children. So I just think it's the right thing to do for this country because we're a nation founded on the rule of law. That's not something that's necessarily hostile to most of those millions are not otherwise innately bad people, but these are people, regardless of whether they're good people or bad people, we're a nation founded on the rule of law. So I can't, with my level of sort of moral clarity on this, I can't be a father of two sons in the White House, tell them they have to follow the rules when I'm leading a U.S. government that actively isn't following its own rules. And so I think as respectfully and humanely as possible, we have to return them to their country of origin. But Ian, there's a philosophical point here too, which is I think once we fall into the trap as leaders of trying to make decisions based on how we fear they will be portrayed, then we're done making the right decisions and we're just down the road of actually dancing to what we think we're going to be portrayed as. And it becomes circular. Whereas I think the job of a good leader is to do what is right, and when the public does not agree with you, to persuade them of the fact that that was still the right thing to do.
I do think the public are now very aware of the problem that's happening right now. I'm totally comfortable with mass deportations. I could definitely stomach watching mass deportations happen. I mean, we've been forced to stomach watching it happen the other way. I don't know if I'm broken on the inside, but I mean, reading these stories about people that can't afford groceries and yet are having to watch buses and schools emailing them saying, hey, don't come in today because we've decided to give the school that you've been funding for years with your tax dollars to illegal immigrants so they could sleep. I feel bad for those people. You know what I mean? I feel bad for the American people that are looking at are suffering at the gas pump, suffering at the grocery stores, and constantly being told by the left that you need to feel bad for someone else somewhere more than you feel bad for yourself. I think it's time for Americans to get a little bit more selfish in that regard and stop. And I think they will do. I think we're suffering enough now that people are going.
Yeah, you got to militarize the border. There should be, I mean, I don't hear this enough in the rhetoric, but there should be machine gun nests pointing outward away from our borders saying, but then what you need is a leader at the top that's not waving people in, because if they're waving people in, no machine gun nest. We're not going to do that. But if I think that unless you tell them to stop coming, and I mean you do it with more than just your words, that it's not the problem isn't going to.
Well, I appreciate what I would describe as Ian's big ask. And now we're going to walk way back from machine gun nests on the border to like maybe a fence.
Yeah. It's not even that. You statist authoritarian. It's more about not incentivizing this from happening. I mean, giving our resources, giving our tax dollars is essentially telling a lot of people, because I covered this situation on the ground in Mexico. I covered it in Europe, in southern Italy as well. I covered it all over the world, and all these people were told, hey, come on in. We're going to take care of you. We're going to give you all the opportunities. We're going to give you everything anything you want. But they don't tell them how essentially a lot of multinational corporations use them as slave labor. They don't tell them about a larger Koch brother plan that we used to have members of the Senate talk about, specifically from Vermont, that no longer bring it up as a key issue, as of course it is affecting everyone. It is affecting the blue-collar, middle-class Americans, and even more importantly, the poorest people in this country that are now left out literally in the cold.
It is a lie when they say that these are jobs Americans don't want. And we saw this when Donald Trump, I think the number was around 600 or so individuals deported from meat processing plants in the South. And then once several hundred people are deported, these companies say, we need to hire, so they have a job fair. Who shows up? Americans. And there were interviews, and you can Google and watch these videos. One man is asked, why are you coming to work at this plant? These are jobs that Americans don't want. And he goes, are you kidding? Pays $14 an hour. That's more money than I'm making right now. It's a good job for me. They want you to believe nobody wants these jobs as they give them away and drop the prices. And I got to say, it is these large multinational corporations that know they can pay people under the table dirt wages, and this is how they get cheap labor.
I just want to say one thing to Ian's point from earlier. I think it's important to understand what's going on, like on the ground in the southern border. Have any of you guys been to the southern border?
I should.
I have.
Oh yeah, because actually you have.
Yeah.
So I think that probably affects your view, Candace. It definitely affects mine, having been there. It's not like you have this situation where illegal migrants or whatever are trying to cross the Rio Grande, sneak across, get a sprint, and then do you shoot them or not? It's not one of those situations. It's organized by our own government. It's facilities. It's actually what was striking about it is there's a lot of things in life that are pretty disorganized. Like starting a startup company is pretty disorganized. You guys maybe have a similar enterprise here that you started from a ground floor. I've seen a lot of things that are good in life are disorganized. This is not disorganized. This is striking because of how markedly organized it actually is. There's a process. They give you forms. Here's the box you check. You don't have to know English. They'll just tell you which box to check. Seeking asylum. Do you have to show proof of political persecution to get asylum? Not at all. It's just a procedure you go through. You know exactly go from point A to point B to point C. And so part of militarizing the southern border is the signal that we send, because that's the signal we're sending right now. Not only coming in, but then you show up to Sanctuary City. You get baby formula, you get sneakers, $7,000 per migrant per month, converting South Shore High School on the south side of Chicago into an encampment for migrants. So I think part of what we're doing is offering a clear statement. We end federal funding for sanctuary cities. You know in advance that if your child is born in the United States, they're not going to actually enjoy citizenship. Oh, there's a wall and a fence and people wearing camo because they serve in the U.S. military facing outward. I'll never have the military carrying out domestic law enforcement functions, but facing outward against what currently is an organized invasion into our country. That's, I think, what's going on. And so this idea of you got guys with guns and do you shoot or not, it's just not even close to what's happening right now. And I think part of this goes back to, it's not the technicals that matter. It's a statement of intention. If we believe, and we have a national consensus, and I believe we basically do, but the Democratic Party needs to align and admit it openly, that we do not want large numbers of illegal people entering this country, we absolutely and quickly can put an end to it as a technical matter. The problem is there's a statement of intention that not only is that not what much of the Democratic Party believes, that same wing actually believes that it is inherently a good thing. And the question is, how do you adopt policies that facilitating it while pretending like you actually wish for the opposite? That's really what this is about. So all the technical solutions become really details, footnotes, compared to really a debate about the intentions. Do you want a mass change in the composition of the U.S. electorate and the composition of the ethnic and linguistic background of people in the United States, or don't you? That's what's on the table.
When it comes to using the law, you said earlier you want to stick with the law, like focus on the law, and really as the president, that is like your job as the commander of the military, number one. But like law and order, I get, but sometimes law and order can be used for evil.
I agree.
And we need to be diligent or at least judicious about how we implement. I don't know if you want to call it prosecutorial or commandorial, expression. You get to pick and choose when you enforce the law. So like deportations, I'm still, my jury's out on this one right now.
It was for me for a while too, but I think that's the only.
I feel nothing.
Yeah. Look. Let me stress.
I'm good with people to turn on their neighbors and be like, I think he's illegal, and that kind of.
Yeah, we're not talking about that. But look, humans can do bad things. I actually have a tremendous amount of respect for people who are willing to traverse miles through desert, dozens or hundreds or thousands of miles, because the dream of America is so incredible. but it's got to be a legal process.
But it's not even the dream that's being sold to them anymore. It's just you're being offered free stuff now. You know what I mean? This is not the American dream, and I'm suffering so much in this country, and I'm willing to traverse through the desert for an opportunity. Like you said, it is now systematic. You are going to have a better life as soon as you get here. It's all set up for you. You know, I met a journalist that found the dumping point where they're being told to dump all of their IDs. They're coming in on flights from other countries, dumping their IDs because they're being told to. She had 3 bags filled with their IDs. And then they were handed these pamphlets from the UN, by the way, which was beyond bonkers. She showed me this pamphlet that was coming from the UN. And they're being told to do this to come into this country because they know that there are politicians that are setting up an entire system for them where their lives will be better. So this is not the same mentality. People that are coming at the border right now, we have to let go of this idea that they're just these suffering people who are willing to do anything for an opportunity. They're just being offered handouts at the expense of the American people.
And it's like an assembly line to bring them in.
Yeah, free healthcare and free
free everything.
gender
So,
changes.
It's lottery ticket.
I'll use it to segue. One of the things I've heard quite a bit, many people back in my hometown, Chicago, have said, I can't afford to pay the rent. My groceries are too expensive. We just went to Hy-Vee, grocery store out here. It was great. But, it was expensive. I mean, I got 3 things of salami. I always love buying salami and cheese dip. A couple things of heavy whipping cream with our coffee. 4 grocery bags. It was $300. To be fair, we got some vitamins and some protein powder. I know there's a little bit more expensive, but I was surprised to see this little bit was so much. And I hear people say, why are, in Chicago particularly, when I went and visited home, they're paying these people rent, they're putting them in hotels, they're giving them our schools, they're getting a free pass from our tax dollars, and I can't afford to pay rent.
Right.
I can't afford to survive. So part of the immigration issue that many people are feeling is the economic hit they're taking. We're paying taxes that are supporting all of these flights where they're bringing in hundreds or thousands. These buses, they're being paid for by the American taxpayer, while the American taxpayer suffers and can't afford to pay rent.
Yeah, and I think actually that's what makes this a nonpartisan issue. This should actually be a slam dunk issue for us. So this was your hometown, Chicago. I didn't realize that. I visited the south side of Chicago earlier in this campaign, which is a very traditional campaign. South Shore?
South Shore.
Yeah, and a couple of different areas too, but we went to South Shore High School is where we finished the day. And, oh, really? That's where you grew up?
Midway Airport.
Oh,
2 blocks away.
All right. Well, good deep dish pizza and all that. You know,
It's called soup.
There's some things to like.
Well, that's the tourist stuff.
Art
Come
of
on.
pizza. Check it
Yeah,
out.
I mean, but that's what I am when I go. I mean, we don't get to go to Chicago every day, so we pick some on the way out. But, it was interesting where it was a room full, maybe like this one. A little bit different ethnic composition. It was 95% black, 150% Democrat, as they told me before you went. Maybe that's how they count their votes. But anyway, it was interesting, right? The first part of the exchange was contentious because some people came with some questions that were, I think there were some people who had some real animus to me in that room. One woman, she asked me a question, walked straight out because she didn't like my answer on racial reparations. But actually things changed pretty quickly when we got to the question of illegal mass migration, where they're literally converting the local high school into an encampment for migrants at a cost of $7,000 per migrant per month when the people in that community, Americans, are asking the question, what about me? And actually later it came up, somebody else asked me on their own, I wasn't bringing up foreign policy, why are we sending our money to Ukraine? Almost challenging me like I was a person who would, presumably because of being a Republican or whatever, believe that this was a good idea. And I explained that, no, this is actually a very bad idea. We should not be doing this. And we actually left with a lot of common ground on both of those issues, which is why I think it's actually very important not to see the America First movement through the prism of even the Republican Party. I mean, the Republican Party means very little. It doesn't mean anything to be a Republican.
Well,
it doesn't predict what you mean based on foreign policy. It doesn't predict what you think about free speech. It doesn't predict what you think about national security, state overreach. So that label means a lot less. But I think that because of what you just said, it's expensive right now. People are struggling in this country. This is something that should cross partisan lines, racial lines. I think there's an opportunity for us to deliver a landslide election in 2024. And a landslide minus some shenanigans is still a win, which, I think is something we have to prepare for. And that's kind of my whole MO in this thing.
I saw several polls. Many of you may have seen them. The youth vote swinging towards Donald Trump. That's pretty shocking. But I have to imagine if, from where I grew up in Chicago, I've got my relatives talking about, they're talking about building physical encampments, taking the whole area in the south side and building a camp from scratch. I remember when I was 16, I got my first paycheck. Doesn't everybody remember that? And you're like, I was supposed to get paid, $8 an hour. I worked X amount of hours. And then you look at your check and you're like, where's my money? And then all the older guys laugh, and they were like, look at the tax section.
It's called theft.
Now imagine, that's right. Now imagine 16, 17, 18-year-old kids working their first job or whatever, get that first paycheck. They see how much money is taken from them, from their hard labor. They work their fingers to the bone. And then at the same time, on the news, your tax dollars, $7,000 per person per month. We're talking about $84,000 a year for free to people who are not from this country, who have not worked for this country. And you, hardworking young man, have a third of your income taken by the government to give to them.
And maybe it's because we have a $34 trillion national surplus to spend on this. No, I'm just kidding. It's actually a $34 trillion national debt. We're already in the hole. And so, anyway, I do think that the silver lining in this is that the more we kind of talk about this through classical Republican versus Democrat, fire Biden kind of mentality stuff, which is super boring and not the right way to look at this election, I think the more we're going to fall into the trap of getting another 50.1 election where we're playing tug of war and MSNBC's trotting out the winner 6 days after the ballots are cast. That's not the direction we need to go. I think there is a movement that transcends partisan and racial boundaries. I think it transcends national boundaries right now, too, in many ways, what you see in certain other countries. But in this country, I can get 75, 80% of this country agreeing on many of the things we're talking about right here.
Hypothetical, you get elected, day one, what do you begin doing to help alleviate the stress on the economy and the average person to help them increase their standard of living and better the economy?
Yeah, look, I think that there's some very basic things to do. One is the easiest thing you could do to alleviate both the national debt and the economy at the same time. There's a lot behind this, but I'll just get to the punchline. Get the oil and natural gas out from underneath our ground. We know how to do that. Sell it. And buy down about $8 trillion of our national debt. That takes us from 34 to 26. Next, end this, and a lot of the foreign wars in Ukraine, elsewhere, that's another $7 trillion of our national debt. Now our national debt problem, $7 trillion was due to Iraq and Afghanistan, and I don't want to be on the track to do the same thing. And then initiate a mass firing. Not a chisel, but a chainsaw-style firing.
Afuera.
Of 75% of federal bureaucrats. Start that on day one. That is, of every 4 people there, 3 of them will be gone. Definitely by the end of the first term, and preferably sooner. And problem is, when you got a bunch of those people showing up to work who should have never had that job in the first place, they start finding new things to do. A lot of them is writing regulations that Congress never authorized, which is acting like the wet blanket on the economy. And my first action as it relates to the regulatory state is any law that Congress didn't actually pass or specifically instruct an agency to write a regulation for, it's my view, and the current Supreme Court's view, that it's unconstitutional. Rescind all of them and state on day one we're stopping enforcement of those regulations and view them as null and void. That grows this economy. It increases the supply of housing. Think about housing. We have land use restrictions. We have EPA restrictions that are limiting new housing construction. Increase the supply, brings down the cost, grows the economy. Energy, unlock the supply of oil, natural gas, coal, nuclear energy. Increase the supply, bring down the cost, grows the economy. Stop paying people more money to stay at home instead of to go to work. Increase the supply of labor. Most small businesses, the hardest thing they find right now to expand is to hire new people to fill those roles. So even before I get to reform of the Federal Reserve, which is a favorite topic of mine, that's not a day one item. Just literally day one. These are the kind of steps we can put into motion. And yes, I think we get back to 4% GDP growth, possibly 5% GDP growth.
It could be even
by the end of my
magnitude.
first term.
We might land magnitudes of growth because what we're going to do is transform into a hydrogen-based fuel economy.
Here we go.
They figured out at Rice University how to.
He's not wrong.
Yeah, they take what's called.
That is interesting.
You needed to hear that.
They use this,
But he's not, but I think that
they figured out how to make it profitable to make hydrogen, essentially. This has been the entire time. It's like it costs too much money to make the fuel. They figured out you take any carbon trash, you hit it with a laser called flash joule heating, 7,000 degrees for 0.1 milliseconds. And it turns it into, you can get hydrogen and graphene as a byproduct, which you can use as a building material to build houses, build roads, to enforce your roads by making them 3 times stronger. It's 200 times stronger than steel by weight, this material, pure carbon. And for every kilogram of hydrogen you produce with this process, you get about $4.50 of graphene. And then we can sell the graphene. You can also take the oil that this would displace. Technically, a hydrogen economy might displace the oil. You can turn the oil into graphene, so we can keep pumping it, and we can keep selling it.
Now, as esoteric as that may be for many people, the core fans of the show have heard it a million times.
Is that right?
I think the actual simple message, though, is innovation in the energy sector.
Yes.
Beyond just oil. It could be hydrogen, it could be fusion. I mean, there's big breakthroughs there. Nuclear energy.
You can pump the hydrogen through the natural gas lines of the planet, so we've already got an infrastructure. The guy's name is James Tour at Rice University. I'll put you in touch with if you want to go.
I would love to learn more.
Say something.
No, I was just going to talk
Holy
about nuclear
fucking
energy in terms
shit.
of one of the main obstacles to this. And this, I think, to the extent that this involves actually what exactly laser accomplishes, but is it sort of splitting of the
It's
nucleus.
electricity. Oh, what do you?
I think that it would or not fall within the NRCs and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
No, it's not nuclear.
Yeah,
This
okay.
process. It's physical breakdown.
Just physical breakdown. Got it. So I'll have to learn more about that. But I'm talking about at least the production of more kinds of energy in the United States, including nuclear energy. Again, one of the obstacles is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And again, the right answer is you can't reform these agencies. I think the right answer is to get in there and just shut them down one by one.
Just say afuera.
Afuera.
No.
Well, I would say if
what
I-
means outside? You're trying to say fuego?
Yeah.
Is that what he was saying on the?
I mean, when
Fuego means
outside, you
fire.
could like throw it out.
when
right?
no, when Millet was
All I'm
pulling
saying
the
is-
things off the wall, yelling afuera.
You know,
means
Listen,
outside.
I've said this many
Yeah.
times. If I have
That's
not
what he
made
said. I don't
Javier
repeat what he
Millet
said.
look like a moderate, by the end of my first 3 months, I haven't done my job. All right, so I like the guy. I actually been following for a long time.
Goes around with a chainsaw. You
Which
know?
I
yeah,
think is one of
chainsaw
the-
first, chisel second.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that got me excited about you just as a candidate was just it's remarkable to me that we have all of these people that are running and they make it seem like being America first is something that's dirty, like it's something that's wrong. And I just could not get over all of them parroting this point that we could do both. Right, that drove me crazy. I wanted to scream as I was
walk
sitting
and
there.
chew gum.
Yeah, we can do both. We can take care of the Ukrainians and every other country. We can do it. Look around you. That's what I kept asking. Look around you. Does it look like we are successfully doing both? Have we been successfully doing both? I mean, this country has been in a steep decline, and a large part of it is because what ends up happening is what we saw on that stage and what we've seen just throughout this entire election process is just people are bought and paid for, right? And the people that they tend to sell out are always the American people. We're told that we have to feel bad, we have to put ourselves last. It's always an American last perspective.
Yep.
And so it's just been exciting to have you get up there on the stage and everywhere that you've been going, and you've been doing so many podcasts. Without question, I think everyone can agree that you have been the hardest working candidate this election cycle. I've seen you everywhere. I mean,
I appreciate it.
obscure podcasts. It's really wonderful. Just the work ethic is so impressive. And you're young. And I'm a mother of 3, and so it was something that was very important to me, and I'm just kind of showering you with the compliments here, obviously.
I appreciate it, though, Ken.
But
Thank you for
that is something that's very scary for me, because when we talk about even the process of illegal immigration, you think about that as a parent, this is also going to become issues down the line when we talk about the violence that is going to be imparted in inner cities. This is something that terrifies me. Something that terrifies me. You have unchecked people coming into this country. We know that they are coming from countries where the cartels are running things. We have no idea who is being brought into this country at this moment. As a parent, that's terrifying. And I just think a lot of the candidates are not willing to talk about these issues in a way that provides clarity to those of us that are worried about the future for our children.
I think most of the candidates are really reading scripts provided to them by their super PACs or the people who fund them. I mean, I think that's effectively what American politics has become, for the worse. And I think you got to be willing to say, I mean, it's sad the system works this way, but our family's put over $25 million, close to $30 million into this campaign. There's going to be more going in. It's what it takes to run presidential elections. Even still, it's hard to compete against the super PAC industrial complex, where the amount of money being spent on television advertisements by the like of Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, but it's not really them, it's the super PACs. That's the real cancer on American politics. And the super PACs culture selects for candidates that just make them vessels for advancing what that super PAC industrial complex wants to advance. And so one of the things I think, again, this is an opportunity to go beyond traditional partisan boundaries, building towards a Reagan 1980 style landslide. You got Ukraine in that category. You got the southern border in that category. I think we should be favoring ending super PACs, not by violating any First Amendment rights, but by just saying that, you know what? If there's a $3,300 maximum that you can give to a campaign, that's what it is in the GOP primary. That's a lot of money, but it's not enough to corrupt a politician who's running for president. That if there's a super PAC that's donating to presidential candidates, if you're donating to that super PAC, you should also be capped out at $3,300 per person. I don't think that that's too much to ask. This used to be a left-wing idea, actually. I think that right now we're at a place where the Republican Party absolutely can and should embrace it. I think it'll be wildly popular. And again, part of building towards an 80+% electoral majority, minus some shenanigans, is still a decisive landslide victory. But anyway, I think that's what's going on, is you kind of have candidates, when you start to think that they're actually advancing their own convictions, we're kind of missing the point. They're vessels for advancing what the donors really want to wield them to actually stand for. There's this issue in Iowa right now, actually, which is super interesting. I was actually at an event at the state capitol earlier today. Sounds like an esoteric issue maybe, but it's not really, because it affects every American. Is they're building a carbon dioxide capture pipeline across this state that we're in right now. So they make a lot of ethanol in the state. They say capture carbon dioxide, build a pipeline across the state, and then bury it in the ground in North Dakota. Why? No one really knows why, other than the fact that our federal government's providing subsidies in the name of fighting climate change, because carbon dioxide is a bad actor. It doesn't make any sense. Carbon dioxide is plant food. So this idea of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere being some sort of worthy goal, I could go on for a full day about why that's based on a false premise. But we're using our own taxpayer money to pay people in the state. There's a couple of businesses, that are now using eminent domain to seize the land of farmers here, or rights to use their land, when most Iowa farmers who I've met do not like that being built across their backyard. So I could go a little bit longer on this, but the point I'm bringing it up is not a single other Republican candidate, not a single one, has expressed opposition to this carbon capture pipeline. Why? Because the most powerful people, at least in this state, as it relates to the Republican donor establishment, do not permit you to oppose the carbon capture pipeline.
Interesting.
And so again, it comes back to that mega money in politics.
Could we go a little bit deeper here? Because you mentioned the Federal Reserve just a little bit, and this is an institution created in 1913 that's a quasi-private cartel parading around like it's some kind of private bank when it's essentially not. Thomas Jefferson said that he believes banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies, with their corporate bailouts, with the inflation, which is essentially a tax on the poor, a theft of resources from the poorest people in this country, and the Fed, yes or no?
I would like to, but that requires legislation. I make promises that I will keep as your next president. And here's the promise I'll keep with respect to the Fed, is a 90% headcount reduction at the U.S. Fed, combined with restoring effectively a single mandate. One purpose: peg the dollar to commodities, stabilize the dollar as a unit of measurement. It should be just a basic function of arithmetic and nothing more. And again, part of the problem is you got those 23,000 people or so at the U.S. Federal Reserve now that we don't need to do that narrow function of pegging the dollar to commodities. They find things to do. That's where the central bank digital currency comes from. That's where a lot of these, the CBDC, which is a backdoor way of ensuring a government surveillance system of being able to wipe you out for doing something the government didn't approve of. That's how you get to raining money from on high like manna from heaven in the aim of balancing inflation and unemployment. It's like the equivalent of hitting two targets with one arrow and missing at both. So hopefully that answers
Well,
the
so,
question.
so we'll dive a little bit into that, because one of the big stories today is that the SEC has approved Bitcoin ETFs. I believe more than just, I think it's crypto market ETFs. And there's a lot of people who are concerned about it, a lot of people cheering it on. But this brings us to the acceptance of the U.S. government as it pertains to crypto, and the fear that they're going to push central bank digital currency, also known as CBDC. Could you explain to people what that is and your position on CBDC?
Sure. And so let's just take decentralized options in the blockchain, like Bitcoin or otherwise. Put that to one side. I think greater decentralization, at least as an option that's available to hold the dollar to its feet as an alternative to opt out from that system, is a good thing.
Well, let me pause you real quick.
Yep.
Sorry, there's probably a lot of people who don't know what central bank digital currency even
So
means.
so I was gonna segregate the issue of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency away from the central bank digital currency, which the easiest way to think about this would be turning your dollar into effectively a digital asset that's centrally monitorable. We could use, talk about which way they would use the blockchain or not, it doesn't matter. The simple way to think about it is take the cash in your pocket and convert that into the equivalent of like tokens you'd get in a digital video game. And they can either up or down the number of points you have, which are dollars in your bank account, not based on what you deposit or take in or take out, but based on whatever the government actually decides is the criteria for increasing or decreasing what's in your bank account. Indeed, they're doing this in China. In fact, that's one of the principal arguments for bringing it to the United States, is that China is adopting a digital yuan, has an equivalent of a central bank digital currency in China. Now, we have to ask ourselves, why is China doing it? The general argument in the UK, which is moving in this direction, and the US, which is taking the earliest of steps to move in this direction through the so-called FedNow program. The argument is we have to keep up technologically with China, keep up with the Joneses, or keep up with the Jinpings, as the case may be here, right? You have to ask yourself, why is China doing it? They want to actually be able to exert monitoring and control and discipline of their own citizens. It's the ultimate manifestation of a social credit system. So that's what this is about in China. Now, there's a version of this. It wasn't exactly through a central bank digital currency per se, but to at least understand the impact it could have on your life, look at what they did to the Canadian truckers. They cut off access to their bank accounts. They cut off access to their Canadian dollars when they took a position against vaccine mandates and a position against lockdowns that they couldn't address through any means other than through using the weaponization of the financial system to do it. So if we bring that central bank digital currency to the United States, it offers another tool for what would be otherwise a tyrannical permanent government to be able to more effectively implement its will. To be clear, and some people fall into this trap of thinking that just because we eliminate the tool, we've eliminated the intention. No, the intention still exists. But that doesn't mean that you still give them the same tool that would allow them to more quickly implement what they already are looking to in other ways.
I'd like to elaborate on why this would be so nightmarish. Several years, we're talking 8 or so years ago, 10 years ago, we started seeing the rise of social media censorship. If you tweeted something that was against the popular narrative, you'd get suspended. Many of us were called conspiracy theorists for arguing what was actually happening. In fact, it was reported by, I believe it was Gizmodo first in May of 2016, that Facebook had staff removing conservative news outlets from their trending tab. That's just your ability to speak. I know, one of the more serious things to be able to lose, to not be able to engage in the public sphere.
It's a relief.
Imagine the same scale of censorship, but in terms of you buying milk, bread, and eggs.
Yes.
One day you wake up and you go to the grocery store and you're using your app, because that's what the central bank digital currency will be forced to be on your phone. And you'll walk up, you'll put your milk on the self-checkout because there's no humans anymore. You'll scan your phone and it'll say you have been banned from purchasing for 24 hours due to hate speech.
Or docked a certain number of dollars.
But by the way,
Can't
just
say
going
I
back
trust
to
him.
just bringing up
This
COVID and the
information
things that we
seems
saw
good
throughout COVID, that was one of
But I
my
wouldn't
major
give to have
concerns
the
that I
venture
spoke about.
company out of my hair.
Just the
They do come up with
digitization
some
of
good
everything that was
machines,
happening at
though.
that time. Suddenly,
I
like
can't
they
deny
were
that
trying to
we
say your
benefited
menus
from
could
using
have
some of the
potentially have
improvements
COVID.
they've
They kept saying that dollar
You
bills.
got
This was, do
them.
you remember this in the
Thank
news?
you. I'll have
Dollar
these sent
bills
to
could
Disney
spread
where you can
COVID,
get
and
them
suddenly they
shipped
didn't
to
want any
Ruby
more
Bay.
dollar bills. We're no
I
longer
can already
accepting cash.
taste the product.
So many
Here's your card,
restaurants,
adventurer. I couldn't
grocery
have
stores,
made
no longer
this
accepting
deal
cash because
without you.
it could potentially spread COVID, which was an absurdity
thought
in
I'd
my
make
mind,
more of
an
this
absolute
stuff ever
absurdity.
again.
But a lot of these things are now
stirred in me a
long-lasting,
great
right? In
sense of
terms of
nostalgia,
the
adventurer.
fact that there's not that
Kind
many
of
human
reminds me
beings.
of
I
the
don't know if
last
it's the
time I
same where
made a
you live,
batch of
but
Trog
not that many
brew.
human beings at the grocery
Thank
store
you.
anymore. They kept up
The memories
things
warm my stomach.
after COVID that
yeah.
they said were just for
Stuff from
COVID,
Storm
and I
Stuff,
felt that it
huh?
was
Have another
very much
recipe
because
I
they
learned
did
from
want us
Chad.
to move in this direction
Would
as
you be
society.
interested? It won't take
Well, you can
long
see it in Las Vegas.
Potentially to prep us for this.
And I just want to play that one step forward to tie earlier to one of an increasingly what looks like a Republican policy of certainly of a certain candidate of tying your government-issued ID to your internet account or your social media account. So now combine that with the central bank digital currency. Now you don't have to tie it just milk in the grocery store. Every time you hit like on a tweet that does not match the regime's approved narrative, we could dock you 50 cents. If you hit retweet, you actually dock you $1. And so Jack Smith, I just want to tie this together, right? Right now in the subpoena for one of the federal cases against Donald Trump, there's so many of them you lose track, but it's one of the Jack Smith federal prosecutions. In that subpoena, I think it's worth people understanding. It certainly affects people who are watching us right now. Might affect some of us in this room, maybe some of us at this table. I don't know. Not me because I wasn't using Twitter back then, but if you retweeted or liked one of Donald Trump's posts in that year, that's now the subject of Jack Smith's subpoena. So let's play that forward. That your username or whatever has already been the subject of that subpoena. Now say that that handle was tied to your government-issued ID, which is also tied to your digital dollar. He can't convict you in court necessarily. But why don't we give him a nice little spanking? Take a few dollars out of their bank account. That's literally where this vision of the so-called Great Reset, that's where this lands.
That would be a coup. That would be something that would be an attempted coup by global enforcement powers that we cannot allow to happen.
They can already freeze your bank accounts when you're under investigation. Say you worked for a company and then all of a sudden one day you can't buy things. But with the central bank digital currency, it goes so far beyond that. We're going
Social
into
credit system.
but it's automated.
Yeah.
It's to where it won't even be a judge saying, I think there's probable cause to freeze his account. It's going to be a machine saying, your account is frozen. And good luck. Imagine having to go to the DMV every time you needed to get your bank unbanned.
And this is the, tell me if this is like too abstract and we can sort of bring it back, but it's a pattern that repeats itself in so many different places where right now you're right, they can freeze your bank account even as it exists today. But it takes something that requires the government to take a quantum step, right? You have to have a preponderance of evidence that's 50.1 to percent chance of actually having done it. And then to actually convict somebody, you have to be beyond a reasonable doubt. That's 99.999%, 100% certainty. So you have to take these quantum steps of certainty. What the central bank digital currency does is it takes this system that ties a quantum level of certainty and just makes it continuously varying, right? So it's not like Jack Smith is going to say that he's going to wipe out your entire bank account, freeze your entire bank account. The way this would work is I'm just going to dock you by 50 cents. Like, I think that's actually the thing to see is it wouldn't be, if we were using the analogy, Tim, I think it would be less that we're not going to allow you to buy the milk at all. It's going to be that instead of having $100, you now have 99. So it's designed to change behaviors at the margin, and that's really where this is different from the current status quo, where they technically could also freeze your bank account entirely, couldn't buy any milk. It's not that. It's that you like to post we didn't quite like. We see that because of your government-issued ID tied to your social media profile. It's not like we need to go to the court system for that. It's not like you've done something criminal. But we're just going to dock you a little bit with a little so-called nudge in the right direction. That's actually what's actually far more frightening with the CBDC.
There's so much more here, too, we can't even begin to imagine. How about geo-locking transactions? Meaning, let's say there is a political rally happening in D.C., and the president says we're going to have a rally. So then anybody who attends that rally, their ability to transact is shut off within 50 miles and just these individuals. All of a sudden you can't buy train tickets, you can't buy milk, you can't buy pizza, you can't go to McDonald's to buy food.
And for anybody who thinks that's a ridiculous example, I believe it's Bank of America that handed over records for anybody who was in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021 to Jack Smith, which is exactly not that far from what you're describing today. So, but I think it's worth it, I think for the people, there's a lot of people in New Hampshire that fit this category when I'm campaigning there who come up and ask, like, this will be the first question they ask at a town hall is like, tell me about your position on CBDC. I share why I think it's a risk, but I think it's important not to fall in the trap of thinking just because we've stopped that, you still have a government that can do a lot of these things to you. It's just that it becomes a lot easier for the government.
That smell isn't ready yet. It's still recharging. Greeting. This fang is merely a token, but what it represents is profound. Ishamahali's strength is in you, adventurer. May you use it with temperance. That is your burden. That is your honor. Lakotomani is called Earthshaker in our language, and his steps are like gathered thunder. He is with you now, and his courage mingles with yours. Together there is no conflict you cannot face. Walk tall, adventurer. Walk tall, Earthshaker.
Me, Earthshaker.
It is good to see you return with proof of victory, and it is good to know you have done so with your bones unbroken.
How may I aid you? Farewell.
As the wind on the plains, you are always welcome here.
Walk with the earth. That smells.
This has got to be like the most efficient.
Well,
You, like the Thunderhawk, should be proud. You have bested every foe we set you before and have done so with strength, courage, and honor. But your path, adventurer, continues. In fact, you will find that true hunters forever strive, forever walk their path with the same pride you have shown me. Now it is time to move on.
go in peace.
The spores from the barons at Helgrim is gathering. He garnered your aid in delivering them. Good. And the emulsion is still potent, so you must have wasted no time in the delivery. Well done, adventurer.